Hey everybody, what's up? It's Chase. Welcome to another episode of the Chase Jarvis Live Show here on Creative Live. You know this show where I sit down with amazing humans, unpack their brain, and share it with you in this amazing format where we get to hear long form conversational uh, genius at work with the world's top creators, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. And today's guest is Danielle Walker, someone I've been trying to get on the show for a while. She's very busy because all she does is write New York Times best-selling books and spread amazing knowledge about food. Now, food obviously is required for human life, and I like to enjoy food. At the same time, I want to be more mindful of what I put in my body. So, a number of years ago, I started paying close attention to that. And one of the people's work that I stumbled on, lo and behold, was Danielle's. She had written a number of cookbooks, one that I loved called Eat What You Love. And this talked about both the positive benefits of eating intelligently, such that you can maximize performance, but it was also a realist's view of this stuff. Like, hey, you can still have things that that taste good and are made of good things, not the off the store or not off the shelf, junk food, so to speak, and acknowledging at the same time that we're all human. Well, Danielle Walker, has a new book and it's called Food Saved Me. This is a little bit more of a memoir around finding health and hope when you have, in her case, she had an autoimmune disease. So for over a decade, Danielle has been a pioneer in leading the movement to eat healthy food that also tastes great, that is free of the things that are bad for us, and doubling down on those things that are good for us. I've found a lot of wisdom from her, and I know you will too. This conversation is awesome. Enjoy it. I'm going to get out of the way. Yours truly in conversation with Danielle Walker. Danielle, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really happy to have you, and congrats on the new book and all you have achieved. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love your work. I was chatting you up before we went. We pressed record here and was sharing that my wife Kate and I have been longtime fans, which is where I first was acquainted with your work through cookbooks, and
Yeah.
we make a lot of stuff out of your book, Eat What You Love, Everyday Comfort Foods. And I'm wondering, for the handful of people, before we dive into who you are, what you're about, your passions, and specifically the book, give us a little bit of an overview, maybe a couple of dots of historic context, and then what it is you're focused on in case people are not familiar with your work.
Sure. Yeah. So Eat What You Love is my fourth cookbook, and it's actually my favorite because it's all comfort foods that are done in a healthier light. And I think that if you're flipping through there, I feel like it brings a lot of hope that you can still really enjoy the food that you love, but in a healthier fashion that's actually healing for your body. And that's kind of where my mission began. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease when I was 22, and the medications and everything else were just making everything worse. And I finally, after a long time, figured out that food could really make a massive impact on my day-to-day symptoms. And so I started out as a food blogger, and since then have written 3 New York Times bestselling cookbooks. And it's my mission in life is just to make food that still looks and tastes and feels appetizing, but that isn't detrimental to our bodies. And there's over 50 million people with autoimmune diseases, so it's not just for me. It's for everybody out there that's suffering, that wants to still be able to enjoy food and all of the nostalgia and traditions that are tied to it.
Food is clearly critical to human life, and at what point in your work or research, or was there some tipping point where you realized that not only is food sort of is it a necessity, but it has, and it's also not just something to steer clear of bad things, but there are also very, very proactive health, nutritional. It's almost like insurance if you're eating well and taking care of yourself, and that can have an effect on so many more attributes and aspects of your life. At what point did you recognize that this was the case? And my experience going to so many Western doctors is there's no conversations about food. And so I'm curious, where in your journey did you say, hey, man, this is actually proactive, and we can, build a healthy body, a healthy ecosystem by putting good things in it.
Yeah, gosh, it's hard to exactly pinpoint it. All of my doctors said that food wouldn't make a difference. And it took me being in a hospital in Uganda, of all places. The story is in Food Saved Me in the new book. And actually, of the doctor that was there, he was from London, but he had lived in Uganda for years. And he was the first one to ever talk to me about gut bacteria, which I had no understanding of, even now being newly diagnosed with a digestive disease, and really just about how what we eat, how what we do, just our lifestyle can affect that microbiome. And so that was really, I think, the first point where I was like, oh wow, this is all internal. There is something happening in there. I mean, I think I had maybe like heard that yogurt had some probiotics, but we're like talking like the sugary stuff in the store that might have had like one strain and probably didn't do a whole lot. And so that was really like the first point. And then after that, being online and just finding other people who had tested out different ways of eating, and reading their personal stories. Because while the doctors I trusted because they had studied a lot, they didn't study nutrition. And they also didn't actually have any experience with having the disease personally. And so as I started finding people with similar ailments that had found healing with food, I believed them because I'm like, you actually know what is happening in your body. You can pinpoint this. You've seen yourself, get into remission or have your symptoms lessened. And so that was kind of the biggest turning point for me when I was like, I need to try this and see if this works for me.
I'm in your book right now. Again, she mentioned it in case you missed it. Food Saved Me. It's a memoir. Again, I'm very familiar with your work from cookbooks, but the subtitle is My Journey of Finding Health and Hope Through the Power of Food. And I've also seen the photographs of you lying on that. Looks like a piece of wood. I mean,
It
it's
was a
like
piece of wood.
a piece of wood in Uganda. And um, there's another sort of some lore about you recognizing this and turning your kitchen at home into somewhat of a laboratory to experiment. And right now, I'm sure there are thousands of people who are listening or watching this show. Maybe they're on a treadmill or commuting to work or whatever, and this the idea of turning their kitchen into a laboratory sounds overwhelming. And most
Yes.
people, they want a quick and easy fix. So at the risk of, oversimplifying your life's work around food and the diagnosing and then treating yourself, just give the folks at home some simple guidelines and, based on your experience and the work in the lab.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so first of all, if it sounds intimidating or daunting to turn your kitchen into a laboratory, that's why I've written all my books, because it was not an easy process. I did not go to culinary school, but I knew that it was necessary because I couldn't eat like grilled chicken and steamed broccoli for the rest of my life. And I feel like anybody that's ever either had to change anything about the way they eat, had a food allergy, tried a certain way of eating for, 30 days, whatever it is intimidating because everything that you know and love feels like it's going to be lost. There's a story, like an opening story about Thanksgiving in this book, and just that feeling of like, I'm never going to be able to enjoy the foods that I loved again. And so I really, the message of the book is listening to your body. So what I ended up having to do was cut grains, dairy, legumes, refined sugar, and anything processed, right? But some people can tolerate some dairy, or some people, might be able to tolerate soaked legumes. And so it's starting out at that point. I give some guides in the back about just here's what to start with, give this 30 days, kind of an elimination diet. Here's some grocery lists. Here's things to just get you started that make it really simple. But then really, really focusing on what your individual body is telling you, and then you can kind of hone it in from there. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And it's about 5 years of going through every single hoop possible to try to figure out what worked for me, and then realizing after I started blogging that it wasn't just for me. It was, for, like I said, just millions of people. I've received hundreds of thousands of messages over the years from everything from joint pain to rheumatoid arthritis to MS, just this massive array of different ailments, different autoimmune diseases, chronic illness that people found this way, and the way that I was eating and my recipes could help.
What what's the reason? What's the cause of the food that's in our universe ultimately being bad for us? I mean, let's look back, hundreds of thousands of years. We've been eating, meat, whether it's raw or cooked, and stuff out of the ground and stuff on the bushes for a long
Right.
time. And why is food such a culprit in today's diet?
Yeah, I think that the food that we eat now is not at all what it used to be like back in the day. And I'm not a scientist. I am not a doctor. I have just learned so much over the years, and so I really tried to lay out kind of what I think are the different culprits in this book in as much of layman's terms as I can, because that's the way I needed to understand it when I was in the height of my disease and trying to figure things out. I think not only is everything really processed, I think the gut microbiome is completely off, especially in the United States. And everything, in my opinion, and from everything that I've read, leads back to the gut, which then also brings in inflammation. It brings in your immune response to things. So there's a lot of different things, but really, I mean, gosh, the majority of our immune system is housed in our gut. Inflammation can start in our gut. So if things are not working well in there, which leads back to the food that we're consuming, then everything can go haywire. So I think there's a lot of different reasons, but I think inherently the way that I eat is anti-inflammatory. You're cutting a lot of those things that can cause inflammation in your body, and the majority of illnesses or even just daily aches and pains stem from inflammation. So starting with your diet, and cleaning that up to get it to be inflammation or less inflammation friendly, I should say, is just it's like the first step.
And I mean, I think a lot of people who are listening here, our watchers and listeners, they're here because they want, if not peak performance, there as a desire and endeavor to do better, to live a richer, healthier life, to pursue your dreams. And
Yes.
obviously, sickness gets in the way of that. But this term inflammation gets thrown around so sort of casually. And if you're not in the business as you are, or if you haven't read your books like I have, I'm aware of this and passionate about food. But for someone who's listening and not like, okay, inflammation sounds good when I roll my ankle and if it's inflamed, I know that's bad. I can take some Advil and the swelling goes down. But talk about inflammation in the body, how it gets there, why it's bad, and why the foods that you're suggesting and that you have researched in your experience are antithetical to this, horrible thing, inflammation.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, that's going to be a question that I'm like, I might need to go look that. I need to go get a definition for that again. I'm like, I'm a cookbook author. Um,
No, I mean, but that's what I love about your work is it puts things in layperson's terms, and in like I don't need to know the cellular root cause of inflammation, but
right, right.
why is inflammation, bad, and why are the foods that you're prescribing, how do they not inflame you like, some low grade rice-a-roni or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I've learned mostly for my disease, for autoimmune diseases specifically. But when there is inflammation in your body is trained to go and try to fight that off. Like that's what it does. That's why the bodies are pretty miraculous, and so it wants to try to heal those things. And if it's just this long term, chronic inflammation, which is what I had, especially in my colon, causing that to be inflamed all the time, is then what set my autoimmune disease off, which is essentially in a very like easy way to explain it, it's your body is attacking an otherwise healthy organ, and that can be different, depending on what you have. Psoriasis, it can attack your skin, and different things, your joints for rheumatoid arthritis. For mine, it was attacking my colon, and the inflammation in there was causing the body to kind of react in that way. And then also just with ulcerative colitis, having inflammation in there is what causes the pain and all of that. And so getting that down by reducing things like refined seed oils and sugars and the things that cause that to spike is what has been essential for me to find the health and just the reduction of symptoms.
So reduction of symptoms. I like that you couched your answer in the reduction of symptoms. But we also are talking, the goal is health here, right? So you're reducing symptoms. And then how, by reducing symptoms, like on how do we get to health? Because I think people who are watching and listening, that's what they want. I want to eat in a way
Right.
that promotes health, not just not being sick, but actually can make me stronger, healthier, make my life, more vitality.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I focus on a few things. I think again, going back to that gut microbiome, also things like bone broth that are helping to strengthen the gut, which again, like just even if you don't have an autoimmune disease that's in the gut like I do, so much stems from there. And so in general, keeping that healthy, I mean, it can reduce, like I said, our immune system is housed there, right? So we have better capability to fight off just general like infections and run of the mill colds and flus. And I think, those things are so important just in our day to day. I mean, like you said, if we have a sprained ankle or we have a headache or we have some pain after we work out and we take an Advil, that puts a band-aid on it and it can get it to, go away for that day. But what's the root cause of it? And I think that's what I try to focus on. And I work with a functional medicine doctor to help me figure that out. Again, I'm like, this is so beyond my pay grade, but I'm trying to understand it in the best way that I can. But for me, it's trying to fix those problems internally. And food is one of the biggest things. I actually talk a lot in the book about how lifestyle in general is so important. Exercise, taking care of your mental health, sleep, rest, all of those things, reducing your stress. Those can all help, internally. But but yeah, I think there's also side effects of taking things like an Advil, right? Like it actually
Mhm.
can increase gut permeability. So that we're going back to that kind of, it's like everything to me circles back to your gut health. And so while you can take things to make the pain or the inflammation go away, it could actually have long-term side effects that then could cause, more health things. So it's eating in a way that reduces all of that is preventative. Like you've said, it's not just about controlling like the symptoms as they come. It's about the long-term effects that it can have on your health.
Yeah, this I'm fascinated by the fact that we here in the Western world in it's August of 2021 when we're recording this, that there is still a debate around so much of the things that we receive from the doctor's office. I'm just going to go to steroid because you talk about it in the book, and if
I
there's
do.
anybody out there who's been on a steroid, steroid has this miraculous effect of making you feel better on a very short time window. And simultaneously, I've had people in my life almost die because they were misdiagnosed, and it dramatically accelerated the thing that they had,
Right.
unbeknownst to and I don't want to throw Western medicine under the bus because there's a lot of things that it does well, but the quick fix, and for those people who are watching right now and you've received this or you've received steroids and haven't thought twice about it, the quick fix is often sort of the beginning stages of a cycle of a downward
Right.
spiral. And um, you talked about that. I think when you were originally diagnosed and you got on a steroid, there was a moment of feeling great, and
Hmm.
then you talked about the side effects. I think you talked about insomnia was one of your main side effects, if I'm remembering correctly from the book. And yet we then often don't attribute that to the medicine that we're taking. So are you an advocate of avoiding Western doctors? Are you an advocate, like, help reconcile this fast-paced world where we need to, get a pill to fix things, and this long-term, you know, sustainable, let's put good things in our body, and over time good things are going to result. Help us reconcile those things.
Yeah. Am I an advocate of avoiding Western medicine? Absolutely not. Am I an advocate of being an advocate for yourself, whether you're using Western, Eastern, natural, when any of those? Yes. I do think, and I talk extensively about all the different doctors that I've had, and prednisone steroids was the first prescription that they would just write, without really asking any questions, without telling you what the side effects would be. And it took me years of being on it first, then avoiding it for years and years before I ever asked, like, is there anything else, and pushing and pushing and pushing about what I could do. And so Western medicine has saved my life multiple times. I had C-sections with my children. I might not have made it through them. I had a really bad flare up that I catalog in the book, my first time being hospitalized with this disease for a decade in 2019. And medication and being in the hospital saved my life at that point. So I am not opposed to it, but I am 100% an advocate for asking questions and trying to do your own research and challenging your doctors, and really advocating for what you know is best. Because yeah, so the prednisone specifically, I was on 100 milligrams at one point, which a lot of people for inflammatory, yeah, that's usually what people's eyes do when I tell them that. Usually, what people do for inflammation, low lying inflammation, doctors will prescribe 5, 10 milligrams, something around that. And so 100 gave me every single side effect in the book. I still have long lasting vision problems from being on it. I still have long lasting joint problems from being on it. I also have problems with my metabolism from being on prednisone, all things that, and I've been off of it now for a year and a half. It was the first time I had to take it in over a decade. And I took it in the hospital and then weaned off of it. And I'm still dealing with the long-term side effects of it. So, I think it's really important to understand everything that you're taking, understand the long-term potential side effects, the long-term potential benefits. But that's not really something that you're going to get from most doctors. That's
Yeah.
not the way that they've been trained to deal with patients. They also see a ton of patients. They also are trying to move a lot of people through to get more people in the door. And so I think you really have to learn to do your own research, to read about all the things and then weigh out your personal cost benefit analysis of those things.
So I'm just going to keep pulling on this thread because I'm, again,
Sure.
as I mentioned a moment ago, I'm so in awe that we have done so many things well in the modern Western world, and how food seems to be this thing that, simultaneously is mostly ubiquitous in a Western world. And there's still so much complexity when I mean, you just say the words and it sounds so obvious. If you eat things that are good for you, then you will feel better than if you eat things that are bad for you. And I believe that most people, certainly the people who are listening to the show, can in some way identify that an apple is better than an Oreo, that a chicken breast and steamed broccoli is better than, uh, a um, bologna from 7-Eleven. So,
Right.
so help, I guess, give us some context of, how we don't have to, cook all of our meals from your cookbook, as inspiring and tasty as hell as they are. And like, where did this was it just an education process for you on how to know what things were good for us in general? Or do you believe that there's an awareness of, you can that in pop culture, that you can actually eat reasonably healthy and get so many of the benefits? Like, help us navigate the day to day, because people have kids and jobs and,
True.
busy lives. And sure, we might, you know, cut a corner now and then. I had Swedish fish last night when we watched the movie, Swedish fish and popcorn. Um, but I can tell you it tasted crazy to me because I don't eat that stuff normally. So,
Yeah.
where do we develop our radar, and how do we know what's good for us? What are sources that we can trust, besides obviously your books are legendary, but just orient the common human who's listening and make them feel okay about the choices that they're making and how to make better ones.
Yeah, I think it starts with reframing your mindset and your priorities. I mean, you mentioned being busy. Our culture, specifically in this country, is to just keep ourselves so busy and cooking and sitting around the table with your family and enjoying a meal, and prioritizing actually making something from real foods went to the wayside a long time ago. And so I purposely named the book Food Saved Me because I want to focus on the benefits, right? Like, I think
Hmm.
so much in our culture is villainizing the food and going on a 30-day diet and, thinking about all the things that are bad for us and that are, that are detrimental or just making food the bad guy. And I learned over the years that it's actually saving me, it's healing me, it's bringing back, sitting around with my kids and my husband around a table, and that need for community and connecting, and food to me has always been that. It's been the center of family time, of meeting new people, having really difficult conversations, having great conversations. And so I feel like there's so much that goes into that, but I think the first step is framing food in a positive light, that it can bring so much to our daily and just everyday life, right? Like from not only the internal, like we're talking about, but just that aspect. It can be great for our mental health. It can, it's good for relationships. So I think once you realize that it can be healing and that it can be so beneficial in so many facets of your life, then you start to realize that it should be a priority. And I think I saw that more than ever in 2020, when we didn't have to be running to sports and we didn't have to be commuting to work. We didn't, have a billion things happening in our day. We saw more people than ever in their kitchens, experimenting with food, cooking things, because they finally felt like they had the time. And I think people want to do it and they appreciate it, but they don't set time out for it. It's like the last priority. And that's why convenience foods, and that's why drive-throughs, and that's why frozen foods, have become so popular. So I feel like that's the first step. The second step, is to starting out easy. I think it can be really intimidating, especially if you are really busy and you don't have a lot of time. But thankfully, since I started eating this way in 2010, 2009, there was hardly anything on the market. I mean, if you wanted to make yourself a meal with the way that I needed to eat, I had to go and get every single ingredient. There weren't any prepackaged things. And now you don't have to make your ketchup from scratch. You don't have to make your, like ranch dressing, your beef jerky, all of your spices. Like you can actually go to the store and find healthier versions of the things that you used to love. So I would say starting there and utilizing some of those great brands that have convenience items is a huge, just good first step to make it feel a little less intimidating. And then also, starting out a few days a week. But in terms of voices to listen to that I think lay it out really well, there's two specific doctors, Dr. Mark Hyman and then Dr. Frank Lipman. Those are two that I feel like do it well, that give you the information that you need, that have very similar, beliefs to the way that I eat. But they also kind of give you the why behind it. Because some people are different. Like when I was really sick, I didn't want to know the why. I didn't want to research it.
Yeah.
I just
Just give
couldn't
me
deal with it.
yeah.
Just give me the list. Yeah. And I think, for people who are chronically ill or people who are really busy, that's just something they don't need to understand or want to know at that point. They're just like, give me the bullet points. Let me just get me started. Right. So I think it depends on what you're looking for. I think if you need to figure it out and understand the why first before you're ready to buy in, then those are two really great resources to listen to.
Yeah, Mark Hyman's awesome. He also talks about food as medicine. He's got a
Yep.
handful of books if you're not familiar with him and his work. Thank you for recommending that. Now, one of the things that I love about talking very transparently about food is you have in your newest book, which we are today celebrating, Food Saved Me, My Journey of Finding Health and Hope Through the Power of Food, is the emotional and sort of spiritual dialogue that we have with ourselves. I like to say that the most important words in the world are the ones that we say to ourselves. And
Mhm.
I have recently come through a period where someone very close to me was ill with autoimmune disease. And it seemed like there was a psychology around this that was very difficult to manage. And in watching and observing and trying to help where possible, that when you don't feel good, it's very difficult to take, helping yourself seriously. And then if you don't
Yeah.
help yourself and you're, oh, well, I'm still going to eat, I'm just going to have one sandwich a day. And the bread in that sandwich is from a low quality source. And, there's this cycle. And I'm wondering if you can talk about the psychological, the emotional, and spiritual dialogue that you had to have with yourself. And then, and then I'd like to explore, how you noticed that the food you were putting in to your body actually helped break that cycle. Or would you I mean, I know from the book that you do attribute that to helping break the cycle because there's a bunch of stuff with gut health, but just
Yeah.
talk to me about that sphere, because you write so eloquently in the book about it. And I think that is a part where people don't even often know that why they don't feel well or unhappy, that it's a part of what they're eating, and how that cycle fuels itself.
Yeah, gosh, yeah. It's a cycle that is, I feel like, never ending. I mean, I definitely think I'm in a much better place than I was. But yes, I talk a lot about at the beginning, not only grieving the fact that you've been diagnosed with this disease that's incurable, which autoimmune diseases, I think all of them that I know of do not actually have a cure. And so you're dealing with that, the mental effects of that, and this ideal that you had for your life, completely now changing and trying to figure out what that's going to look like moving forward. I mean, again, I was 22. My husband and I had been married for like 2 months when I got diagnosed. So my whole life that I had laid out while we were engaged, and all the thoughts that I had about my career and my, future family and what life would look like, all of a sudden was gone. And I had to figure out what that was going to look like with having a disease. And then when I figured out that food could help, there was a whole second grieving process of, well, this is everything I know. I thought I was going to host parties and make all my grandma's recipes, and I don't know how to cook for Thanksgiving, using these ingredients. And so you go through all of these processes, and quite honestly, like, I stalled my healing by years because I mentally couldn't commit to it. I would try it for a week, and then we'd go out to dinner and I'd be like, "Oh, I can eat this, tonight." Or we're having friends over, so I'm just going to throw it all out the window today and I'll get back on track on Tuesday. And your body can't heal that way. I mean, it's essentially like you've got an open wound on your arm, and every time it scabs, you just keep taking it off. Like, it's just never going to have a chance to fully heal if you just keep going back and forth. And so it took me quite a few years to learn that. And it was not until my oldest son, was 9 months old, and I was hospitalized again for, weeks, and I was bedridden for months, and I missed his first steps. And there was just this really dark time when I couldn't take care of my son. That was like my kind of aha moment. And I feel like everybody has to have their own. Nobody can tell them what to do and have them, you won't stick to it unless you internally decide, this is my reason, this is my why. I've seen this work, and now, like, I have to stay this path. But yeah, there's a lot of mental hurdles, not only just from the food side, but to just figuring out what life looks like with that disease, and not wanting to be a burden to people. That's another side with autoimmune. You say your friend, has an autoimmune. The majority of autoimmune diseases are nearly invisible to like anybody else that's around that person. I mean, I could look like this and I could be incredibly sick inside. And so there's people that just walk around feeling terrible all the time, but to anybody around them, unless they're vocal about it and really honest, then they may not know that they're suffering and that they're struggling. And that's a whole other, thing about being in your own head and not wanting to burden people, and not wanting, and people not understanding what you're going through.
If What was your first step? Or what would maybe not yours, but what would you recommend? Because this, you can understand the paradox, right? Of,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't feel myself. I don't feel great. I don't know if I feel bad enough to go to the doctor, because the doctor's going to say, "What's wrong with you?" And we already talked about oh, yeah, he's going to give me a pill or not tie it to food, or maybe she'll, ask me to, change my something else. But is it blood work? Is it, where do you, for someone who's like, I'm intrigued by this. I don't feel great. Haven't felt great for a while. What what's the Danielle Walker prescription of the place to start?
Gosh, well, I think it depends if you have a diagnosis or not. I don't think that it can hurt to just do a 30-day elimination diet, the guide kind of in the back, but those things that I talked about cutting out. And you have to keep track, though. You can't just, cut them and then not pay attention. You also can't cut one and not another, or cut one for a week and then add something. Like, it has to be a systematic approach to, doing the elimination, but then adding one food back in at a time to really be able to see what's happening, because you can't pinpoint something if you're kind of just jumping back into it. So I think that could be the first step, because I don't think that it can be harmful. And then if you don't have a diagnosis, yes, I mean, I still think it's really important to work with the doctor and get the blood work done, get the testing done, so you at least know what you're dealing with. Because I think there's hundreds of different types of autoimmune diseases, and then obviously, like we've said, so many more, just different ailments and aches and pains. And I think when you can actually pinpoint what you have, that can really dictate your path, your treatment path. I do really suggest suggest trying to find an integral medicine doctor or a functional MD. I really love that they're an MD and they can prescribe medications when they're needed, because that they are needed, here and there. And but that they look internally, and they're not just putting a band-aid on it. They're figuring out why, what's happening in your body. And that's blood work, that's stool tests, that's the whole gamut. But they're actually running all those things to try to figure out how we can help, that problem from the inside out, rather than just sending you out the door with a band-aid that's going to rip off at some point.
Yeah, and again, in case you missed that, that's functional medicine doctors and integrated. Usually, those are the two terms that. Am I restating
Yeah.
that correctly, Danielle?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and
Yeah, I
I'll
mean, there's so many different types of practitioners, but I found over the years, I saw naturopaths, I saw, chiropractors, I saw so many different, and they all helped in their own way. But I just felt, especially with having such a severe case of my disease, I felt so comfortable being with somebody who I knew, if I needed to have preventative measures, Western medicine, come in and help save me, that they could do that, but that they also weren't just looking to write a prescription and get me out the door. They were really looking to work with me and figure things out.
yeah, I would it would be I think a fair confession if my wife Kate was sitting right here, she would feel okay with me saying that she had a lot of food sensitivities. And this idea of trying to manage and process all this stuff. You got elimination diet, and there is, from my personal experience watching Kate and reading your book and eating the food that my message would be you can do this. You can get better, and
Yeah.
food can still be joyful and a treat, and every bit as good, if not much better than anything you would be, denying yourself. But
Right.
part of what, there's a great piece of the book. As someone who's ridden shotgun I mentioned some family members, and my wife's sensitive to a number of things. There's a note from Ryan in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
book, and I'm wondering, and this is for if you yourself who are listening right now or watching might not have issues or concerns about people in your life, or sorry, about yourself, but you do for other people in your life. I'm wondering if you can put a little
Mhm.
context. It's just a beautiful piece in the epilogue from Ryan. I resonated a lot with it, and so how would you? Well, just recap that briefly, and then
Yeah.
give us a prescription, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really was adamant on including him in that book because my story is my story, but he's been a part of that, and he's had his own struggles with, being the loved one or the spouse of somebody that suffers with chronic illness. And again, like, that was day 1. We got married, and we practically, I had it from the get-go. So I also really wanted him to speak into just the mental and kind of emotional effects that it has on the person that is close to somebody, because not everybody has an autoimmune disease, but I would bet my life that everybody knows somebody who has something, who's suffering with something. And you want to know how to be there for them. You want to know how to be their support system. You want to understand from, what their perspective is, what they go through. I think like that's so important. And as the person who is sick, it's so important to have that person. No, it doesn't matter if it's your spouse, your neighbor, your mom, your dad, whoever it is. You can't go at it alone. And so he came to the book with the perspective of just trying to give some he's a very analytical, very just like to the point person. He's an engineer. And so he kind of wrote, while mine is very story oriented, his is like, here's some bullet points. Here's how to like jump in and be the person that's the support system for, your wife, for your sister, your mom. And then he also wrote from the perspective of, here's how you have to take care of yourself, because being a quote unquote caretaker, even though I'm not sick all the time, there are very, very hard places in our life where he's really had to step in and be, both mom and dad to our 3 kids, be the advocate for me at the hospital with my doctors when I'm incapacitated and can't speak, be the one that's, working full time, but also trying to get kids to school and sports. And it can be really, really draining. And when I'm going through it, unfortunately, I can't really think of much else besides just trying to get better and get out of the hospital or get back to my kids or, whatnot. And so he gave some really practical tips for just also how to take care of yourself as the caregiver, and how, when he realized, he is what's the saying, you can't drink from an empty cup. Is that the right way?
Yeah.
And just
And you
realizing
gotta
like
put your own oxygen mask on before assisting other
yes,
passengers.
yes, all of those things, and so yeah, he really realized that like if he was wearing himself down to nothing, then he couldn't be there for me, for the kids, for himself, for his job. And so just some really practical tips on how to take care of yourself and also how to be there and be the support system for your loved one. And I think it's essential for people to try to understand. And that's kind of my hope for the book is even if you don't suffer with something particularly, that you'll be able to read it and know how to be there for somebody that you love.
It's as someone who has been in that role, it was so eye-opening and enlightening, and please thank Ryan for me. And I think, there's a great relationship between the person who's trying to fix their gut or has had, food sensitivities or heaven forbid something as extreme as you went through hospitalization. But, there's just the relationship that if you have as a friend or a partner to that person and the self-care that you talked about, and Ryan just did such a great job, so please give him a thank you.
I
I al-
will. Yeah.
I I also want to take a moment and just express a sincere aspect of gratitude because I think you are just the path. I'm watching your journey from cookbooks to now this memoir. And to me, we are in a moment where there's more awareness about quality food than ever before. The belief that it used to be so expensive in order to eat this way that while that perception may persist some places, you've done such a good job. And there are so many great resources in Food Saved Me, even just lists of keywords. I remember like just of
Yeah.
course lists of things to avoid, but lists like not just in the negative things like here's what you should look for: grass fed, sustainable, hormone free, wild caught. There's a vocabulary that if you're listening to this, food is of interest to you. If you don't feel your best, this is a great, very reasonable and rational place to start. Get a functional medicine doctor, get an integrated doctor. So this is just a thank you for being part of the solution for our culture. It is super inspiring to read your story. I cannot recommend your book enough, and
Thank
just a
you.
heartfelt thank you. It's incredible the work that you've done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've always tried to make it as approachable for everybody as I could because I know the feeling of feeling really intimidated and having it be really daunting. So, and again, I'm just like a normal person. And so I try to take everything that I learn and put it back out there in normal person terms. So I appreciate that.
Well, and thank you for being vulnerable too. It's, so many books start out if you never are imperfect and you just eat perfect forever, then you'll never be sick, versus
Right.
coming from a vulnerable place where health has been challenged or you're trying to reconcile this. I know it's good for me, but I just love pizza
Yeah.
or whatever. So there's so many of those things that like you've taken these rough edges off of a culturally charged topic. And thank you for inspiring me. I'm a foodie because I love food. And so I originally was attracted to your cookbooks, and to get the rest of the story has been eye opening and super important. So
Thank you.
congrats,
I appreciate
congrats
that.
on the new book. And
Thank you so
again,
much.
I want to just re-say it again for those folks, in case you missed it. Food Saved Me: My Journey of Finding Health and Hope Through the Power of Food. Um, just congrats. It's so good. And I will also steer people, if I may, to your blog, where you've always
Of
got new
course.
recipes and stuff going on. But now that I've got to say all my stuff and tell people where to go, please, is there any place in the world or on the internet that you would direct the attention of this community who's listening and whose attention you have right now?
I mean, I hang out the most on Instagram, so you can find me there at Danielle Walker. Like you said, free recipes over on my blog. We're throwing a book release party on September 13th. This day and age, it's going to be digital. Had to cancel the in-person tour, which is a bummer, but we've got really fun things planned. So you can tune in, and we'll be cooking. I'll be telling more of my story. I have a special guest. We've got giveaways. That's September 13th, and you can find tickets. You can just go to my Instagram and find them there. But yeah, that's what we've got going on right now other than this book release. And then yeah.
And you get Guy Raz, right, co-hosting that with you.
Yes.
He's been on the
Yes, Guy
show.
Raz
Good
is
guy.
co-hosting. Yep.
Friend of the community here. So check it out. And again, epic book. Congratulations. So well timed.
Thank you.
And I'm really excited to see this hit the bestseller list again.
Oh
This is just like
gosh, I
4 already, right? 4, is that right?
3.
3
I've
already.
written 4 books. Yeah, one
Wow.
was the elusive New York Times. One did not hit it. But yeah, this one for me is it's just I don't even care about those things. I just want it to try. I want to help people. I put my soul in every bump and setback and every triumph into that book in hopes of hoping that other people would have less bumps, that they could learn from the things that I learned from. And so, yeah, as long as it gets into the hands of people who need it, that's all that matters to me. But it would
And
be nice. It would be
it,
nice.
fingers crossed, you don't need those accolades anymore. You're onto a higher mission. Thank you. And I'm also going to sneak one other recommendation in there. Speaking to my community here, the book "Eat What You Love: Everyday Comfort Food" is awesome. That's just
Oh, thank
awesome. My
you.
wife and I cook
Thank
regularly. I think that was a book from like 2018 or something like that, where I
Yep,
originally got familiar
exactly.
with your work. So much good stuff. And if you like concepts of just like, oh, I like rich cheesy pastas and I like all these things, and you've just got great solutions in there, and it's been a big part of our lives. So thank you again.
I appreciate that. Not to put you on the spot, but what's your favorite recipe from the book?
Oh, well, Kate does
Uh,
most of the cooking out of the book, so
okay, to eat it.
there
I'm
a,
like,
lo-
what's your
a
favorite
lot
to
of
enjoy?
a lot of substitutions for things like using cauliflower instead of crappy rice grains, using
Yeah.
um, all the one pot stuff. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
yeah, just if you're new to this Instapot or one pot, like you put everything in there, because Kate and I are professionally both very busy. So,
Yeah.
I mean, she throws all this stuff in there, and then we come home, and a couple hours later, you've got this incredible meal. And there's a vibe of like casserole from the 70s that it doesn't, it's not like
Yes.
that at all. It's so fresh. I mean, we were on an Instapot tear. A friend of ours gave us one, and like your cookbook was the go-to for that. So
Oh, good, I'm glad.
anything out of the Instapot. Anyway, again,
All right,
big
well,
fan.
thank you. Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks again. Good luck on your tour.
Thank
Friends,
you.
you know that it's really important to support Danielle in the week of her pub. So now go check it out. Please pre-order Food Saved Me. You will not be disappointed. Until next time, everyone out there in the internet land, I bid you adieu.